Welcome, you're listening to David the Real Medvite, and today I'm going to be doing a short little talk on original sin. This is something that I've seen a lot of people get confused about. A lot of people don't really understand our position and our objection on original sin. Do we even believe in original sin? If so, what kind? Is it the same as the Roman Catholics? Is it something different? We're going to be looking at that in this video. So there's several confusions in this debate. Some people, one of the Orthodox mainline statements that I hear in this topic is, "Oh, we don't believe in original sin. We believe in ancestral sin." And you don't see them kind of explicate what they mean by ancestral sin. We're going to be talking about that. Some people who are more of the Romanidian kind of guys are like, Augustine was wrong on original sin, and the Pelagian controversy is just something local. I've heard this kind of argument that the Pelagian controversy was something local, so the East, we don't care about it. Well, that hasn't really convinced me, but I've been hearing about these arguments, so. These are some of the things that people get confused about. And the first thing I want to mention on this discussion, I think we kind of had to start with this, is that, first of all, let's look at the Council of Carthage, Canon 110. It says, "Likewise, it seems good that whosoever denies that infants newly from their mother's wombs should be baptized, or says that baptism is for remission of sins, but that they derive from Adam no original sin, which needs to be removed by the layer of regeneration, from whence the conclusion follows that in them the form of baptism for the remission of sins is to be understood as false and not true, let him be anathema." What does it say? Basically, if you say that the babies don't get original sin from Adam, if you believe this, you're anathema. So what should we get from this canon? Well, there is this kind of original sin understanding that this canon affirms. It is considered orthodox. It is considered dogmatic. But it's not really explicitly stated what kind of view this is, right? Is it the Roman Catholic view that is present here, or is it the Orthodox view? There is some original sin accepted here, but what is it exactly? And some people kind of ignored this, which is not a really good thing to do, because this is accepted in the Quinisext Council, right? The Council of Carthage is accepted. These canons are accepted by the Quinisext Council, to my knowledge, and Quinisext is accepted by the Seventh Ecumenical Council. So for us, these canons are dogmatic, right? So we can't just say, "Oh, let's just drop and ignore it." No, we can't really drop and ignore it. But this is where I want to get to the main point of in this video, is ancestral sin and how it relates to this discussion. I will say is that for the Orthodox, original sin is ancestral sin, but where this differs is the original sin that is proposed by Roman Catholicism, for example, we will say is of a different kind. And where we differ, I will say, ultimately, is for the Roman Catholics, inherited guilt is part of original sin. For Orthodox Christians, we don't believe in inherited guilt. So we don't believe that we inherit the guilt of Adam. We do inherit the sin of Adam, but we don't inherit Adam's guilt. Adam's guilt is something that he personally has, but it isn't shared by all human beings. And so this is the critical distinction, I will say, from what I've seen in these discussions. And this is what ancestral sin to me means. It just means original sin. Just take Roman Catholic original sin minus inherited guilt. Just think of it that way. I know I'm being a bit too basic here, but my intention isn't to go too much in depth. There's obviously a lot of in-depth nooks and crannies in this discussion. I'm being a bit more general and basic, but it helps a lot of people to understand where we're coming from. So the debate, as I said, is not whether original sin is orthodox or not. It is orthodox, but rather whether inherited guilt is part of original sin or not. So this is the real debate. And so some Roman Catholics might say, "Oh, we don't believe in inherited guilt, guys. Trust us." sorry, that will be contradictory to how they approach theology for hundreds of years. There's Denzinger 420, and Jay Dyer has a great article. Jay has a great article on this, on inherited guilt and how the Roman Catholic Church changed its position over time. This is from Denzinger 410. I am not going to read the entirety of this, okay, but the critical passage here is that it says that through the sacrament of baptism, the guilt of one made red by the blood of Christ is remitted, and to the kingdom of heaven one also arise, whose gate the blood of Christ has mercifully opened for his faithful. There's other statements here that implies that guilt is inherited from Adam. Let me take a water break. So this is Jay posted this Denzinger, I guess you could say dogma canon, on his article. The article is going to be in the description below. You can go check it out if you're interested. But moving on, you might hear from some people saying, but what about Romans 5:12, right? Paul says in Romans 5:12 that just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, thus death spread to all men because all sinned. Doesn't this imply that we're all sinners, that we all inherit Adam's guilt? Now, for Calvinists, they're not going to care about this response that I'm about to give because they don't care about the church fathers. But for Roman Catholics that at least pretend to care about church fathers, this is going to be important because we have St. Cyril of Alexandria in Romans 5:12. This is his commentary on Romans. He says, how did many become sinners because of Adam? I'm going to read the entire thing because it's important. How could we who were not yet born all be condemned with him, even though God said, neither the fathers shall be put to death because of their children, nor the children because of their fathers, but the soul which sins shall be put to death. So we already see from the start that St. Cyril of Alexandria denies inherited guilt. But let's move on. We became sinners through Adam's disobedience in such manner as this. He was created for incorruption and life, and the manner of existence he had in the garden of delight was proper to holiness. His whole mind was continually beholding God. His body was tranquil and calm, with all base pleasures being still. For there was no tumult of alien disturbances in it. But because he fell under sin and slipped into corruptibility, pleasures and filthiness assaulted the nature of the flesh, and in our members was unveiled the savage law. Our nature then became diseased by sin through the disobedience of one, that is, of Adam. This is a critical part. Thus all were made sinners, not by being co-transgressors with Adam, but by being of his nature and falling under the law of sin. Human nature fell ill in Adam, subject to corruptibility through disobedience, and therefore the passions entered in. So we see, I think, fairly obviously by St. Cyril of Alexandria that we don't inherit Adam's guilt. And I'm going to be outlining more theological reasons for the Orthodox view of original sin. I've copy-pasted my slides from Introduction to Foreign Christianity, which is the part 1 of my History of Christian Theology series. This deals with nature, person, distinction, original sin, right? I'll assume you know what essence or nature means and what personhood means. So I'm going to be quoting from God is Your Dialectic, page 21. Every person, therefore, has all the faculties of the human soul, including the power of choice or will. But the way of using or employing that will, or the mode of willing, varies from person to person. Just the way each person particularizes the human nature uniquely in his own personal mode of existence differs from person to person. Thus, no one person, by employing his natural will uniquely, can determine any other person, since that will be to identify and thereby to confuse person and nature. In the next slide, therefore Adam's sin is a sin that has negative repercussions on our human nature, but Adam's guilt is due to his usage of his will. So it pertains to his mode of willing. Therefore, we do not inherit Adam's guilt in sinning. Man inherits not sin and guilt, but death. I guess sin in the sense of you particularly sinning, right? And so, no inherited guilt. This is part of original sin in Orthodoxy. And I want to finalize this presentation with Ezekiel chapter 18. This is something that I like citing a lot. Ezekiel 18, 19, 20. He says, "Yet you say, why should the son not bear the guilt of the father? Because the son has done what is lawful and right, and has kept all my statutes and observed them." So we see a very similar theme from Deuteronomy 24 that we just see Saint Cyril quote. He shall surely, blah, 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 blah. He shall surely live. The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. So I will say that Ezekiel 18 is pretty adamant that we do not inherit the guilt of other people's sin. We do inherit the consequences of their sin in our present life. So it's not only just Adam's sin and the consequence of his sin that we inherit, but all of humanity, all of their sins, we inherit the consequences of it. That's probably why, for example, we will say that in Scripture, and the first people, let's say, lived for a very long time, 700 years, 600 years, but now we can barely live 80 years, 90 years. If you're lucky, you live for 100 years today. That's due to the consequences of sin, right? And this kind of Roman Catholic view of original sin is why you see from their side views like Immaculate Conception, right? Because they assume correctly that the Virgin Mary is sinless, and she is indeed sinless. We will say that she has original sin, but she's sinless because she never committed any sin. But for the Roman Catholic, if you deny the Immaculate Conception, it is impossible for you to defend the sinlessness of Mary, because she will contain the guilt of Adam in herself as well. So she will also be a sinner, just like all of us. And so this is why you see in Roman Catholicism Immaculate Conception. We don't need this because we already make this distinction. We don't need the Immaculate Conception. This is why we had the Feast of the Dormition as well. Whereas in Roman Catholicism, you have this emphasis on the Assumption because of the Immaculate Conception. So you see how all of these things tie together. They all tie with each other together. And if you make a mistake on one area, you make a mistake on multiple different areas. And this is why in Orthodox you don't see Immaculate Conception, you don't see inherited guilt, you don't see any of these things that the Roman Catholic Church has accepted, right? And these are the parts that we differ. And that is all I wanted to say for this video. So to summarize, original sin is Orthodox. We just don't believe in inherited guilt. Original sin is indeed Orthodox. Ancestral sin is original sin minus inherited guilt. Think of it this way if you want to. And our view of original sin is why we don't have Immaculate Conception and whatnot. So, and also Roman Catholics change their dogmas, of course. So that will be it for this video. Thank you all for watching this. I hope you learned something new. I am 95% sure that I didn't really say anything wrong, but if I did, that will suck, because it will mean that I had to delete this video. But again, thank you all for watching this. I will see you guys in the next video. God be with you all.